Uh, all right. So, you covered volumes 10 to 15, which covered the first three Duma periods, the third Duma being one that lasts for quite a bit. The first Duma is um, the most democratic, but the Tsar, the Duma, is a kind of parliament that the Tsar grants after the October Manifesto, the revolution of 1905, yada yada. The first Duma is popularly elected. There's a number of socialists in the Duma. It's very progressive. The Tsar doesn't like it, so he dissolves it. And the second Duma is called. 20% of the seats in the second Duma are belong to either SRs, social revolutionaries, or socialists. The Tsar doesn't like that. It's not in his favor, so he dissolves that one. And by the time we get to the third Duma, they call it the coup in June 1907. Because the Tsar and other right-wing people, they reformed the electoral laws so that privilege is given to those who have a certain amount of private property. And so, those liberals and people on the right are thereby elected by a majority to the third Duma. It's also within the context of the Stolypin agrarian reforms. There's a recognition that there were some serious problems in the countryside among the peasants that needed to be resolved. And by no means did the Tsarist state want to seize land from landowners. And so instead, they devised this plan of creating what they called land banks, in which the peasants would be able to buy plots of land that they had worked their entire lives for anyway. So it's kind of unfair, but at least according to the liberals, it was an opportunity for peasants to be able to buy their land. The socialists saw it as, just another kind of lecherous program. The More importantly, this is sort of the background for these five volumes. But more importantly, there are a number of works within these five volumes that I think are worth pointing out that I'll talk about, or points. I don't really need to refer to specific articles. You can watch the episodes devoted to them, but I'll talk about certain points that I think are really important in elucidating for who Lenin was in historical context, which is the purpose of this project anyway. The first one is that Lenin really articulates early on in 1906 this idea that revolutions, struggles, the lead up to revolutions, the form of a struggle before revolution and during revolution, there's no set pattern for it. And I think that for us today, revolutionaries, no matter where we are in the United States or in Europe or whatever, it's really important for us to understand that Lenin, just like Marx before him, understood that there's no pattern, there's no set pattern for revolutions. Revolutions struggles are politically contingent. They reflect the political circumstances in which they're coming up, and it's within these five volumes that this opinion really comes through. There's debate within these five volumes that I also think is important about whether or not socialists, that is people on the left, Mensheviks or Bolsheviks, whichever one, should collaborate with liberals. In this case, the Cadet Party. Lenin comes out on the side of no collaboration, although there are Mensheviks who are willing to collaborate with the cadets insofar as it will give them some semblance of representation in this Tsar's Duma. This is also the volumes in which the Fifth Party Congress meets. And the reason why the Fifth Party Congress is important is because most people know they have this concept of Stalin as a bank robber, right? It's kind of made the rounds, and everybody thinks that Stalin was this cool bank robber. Not exactly the case. In fact, Stalin didn't participate in the Tbilisi bank robbery. He helped coordinate it, but from afar. And the irony of the whole thing is that after the Tbilisi bank robbery occurred, and they tried to send the money to the party rejected it because the money was traceable, right? And so at the Fifth Party Congress, the party together makes the decision that they would condemn, quote, expropriations, that is robberies. They would not accept money that was illegally gotten. And this happens at the Fifth Party Congress. There's another important theoretical contribution in these 5 volumes about boycotts that I think is worth thinking about today in our own terms, right? And again, a big part of this whole entire project is to look at the ways in which Lenin's ideas and his approaches to certain things changed over time and how he was a very contingent historical figure. But in any way, he talks about boycotts, and there's debates, questions about whether or not socialists should boycott the Third Duma. And he comes up with this idea that boycotting an existing institution is pointless. Instead, socialists should be engaging with the Third Duma to try to use it as an avenue through which to spread propaganda. He says, if you want to boycott an institution that's new, like they did in 1905 at the Beligan Duma, the first Duma, it was a brand new legislative body, and they boycotted it, and it was successful. If you want to boycott a new institution, that shows that you're abstaining from participating in something that doesn't yet exist but is striving to exist. But to boycott something that has existed for a long time, it doesn't really make much sense, according to Lenin. These 5 volumes also include one of his bigger, more famous works, Materialism and Empirio-Criticism. This is Lenin's major contribution to Marxist philosophy, as opposed to political economy or revolutionary doctrine, in which he is engaging with factions within his own party, Bolsheviks included, who are starting to kind of try to incorporate what he calls idealism. That is this idea of the world not really existing outside of yourself. And he comes up with this theory, or this kind of conclusion, that the danger of this kind of idealism is that if you begin to believe that there is no world outside of yourself, then that would imply that suffering is not real. And so therefore, for Lenin, you can't be a real Marxist unless you're willing to admit that the material world outside of you is real. It exists outside of you. But if you take the opposite, the idealist approach, and you say, the world is, what I imagine it to be, it's all a construct of my mind, then that's fundamentally un-Marxist, because that would imply that struggle isn't real, that you have made it up. There's also another important work in these 5 volumes of the meeting of the Socialist International in 1907. And the reason why it's important is because this is where they work out, A, whether the British Labour Party belongs to the Socialist International, in which Lenin says they do, and B, this is where the Zionist socialists make a bid for joining the International. And it's a big debate. On the one hand, the International doesn't want to allow the Zionists to join as their own constituted party. So the Zionists say, okay, well, then can we join the International as a subsection of the Russian Socialist Party? And Lenin says they can be sitting members, but not full members. So they can participate in the International, but they can't be recognized as a full independent party within the International. There's also the Socialist International is also where this idea of positive colonialism is first promoted by a Dutch socialist. And the idea of positive colonialism is exactly what it sounds like. It's the idea that colonialism can be positive insofar as it can bring undeveloped peoples forms of civilization that can help them achieve consciousness. The Socialist International, they condemn positive colonialism. They say there's no such thing as positive colonialism, and they vote it down, but it will reappear. Karl Kautsky will adopt it later. And finally, another really important, the last one that I'll talk about, is Lenin has a very clear articulation of the Marxist position on religion. And I'm sure that listeners, if you had any exposure to Marx, you've read or you've seen that quote that Marx said that religion is the opium of the masses. It's a little bit misused and misunderstood. And Lenin clarifies that religion is a personal matter for socialists. Of course, orthodox hardline socialists such as himself are atheistic because they're educated and they understand that the supernatural deities are just that. They're constructs of human ignorance, and the idea that if you are educated enough, if you can be educated, then every worker is capable of casting away these religious ideas. But he says that it's not a good idea to shame people for the religion that they practice. In fact, all that's going to do is make people angry at you and not want to join your movement. And so he says the Marxist position on religion is that it is inherently a personal matter, one that over time would be resolved, of course, but for the time being, it's a personal matter. So that's sort of my summary of volumes 10 to 15. It has been good in the month of November to not have to speed read an entire volume. A slight break, but I'm eager to get to volume 16 now. And so the next recap will be 16 to 20.